Do you hear that frightening sound? That's exactly what the radiation dosimeters sounded in the vicinity of Chernobyl on the morning of April 26, 1986. In this video, you will learn about a unique dump truck KRAZ 256B1030, which worked right at the exploded power unit and transported dangerous pieces of graphite from the reactor itself. You will be immersed in the world of real post-apocalypse machinery. Who created this machine, how did it function, and did it really save from radiation? We will tell you the terrible stories of the liquidators and show you incredible equipment that died in the burial grounds of Chernobyl. Stay with us. It will be very interesting. Subscribe to our channel. Put likes and leave comments so you don't miss any details. The KRAZ plant was located just 350 kilometers from Chernobyl. While its workers were peacefully sleeping in their beds, the first 3 vehicles of the disaster arrived at the site of the reactor explosion. Firefighting ZILs with a tanker, a pump, and a foam extinguishing machine. Later, a special ZIL with lead protection for the driver was created, which weighed twice as much. These vehicles watered the affected area with a special chemical solution to settle the radioactive dust. But the first arriving vehicles and the firefighters themselves had no protection. Because of the rush, they were not dressed in tarpaulins, but in ordinary shirts. From the memories of eyewitnesses, the whole sky seemed to glow, high flames, digging from the fact that the bitumen was burning. The roof of the station was filled with bitumen. We walked like on tar, picked up the burning graphite with our feet. Looking at the fate of these people, it becomes clear why the KRAZ with lead protection was created. What would have happened to the driver without this protection? The firefighters immediately received 600 X-rays incompatible with life and 3rd and 4th degree radiation burns on exposed parts of their bodies. That sounds really creepy. They never returned home. They were immediately sent to the 12th hospital in Pripyat. Their clothes, helmets, and even hospital slippers with bedding are still lying in the basement of the hospital. This place is widely regarded as the creepiest place in Chernobyl. Surprisingly, bloggers used to climb there until recently, but now the place has been covered with sand. In this video, we will tell you about the heroes liquidators and incredible equipment that helped fight radiation. Subscribe to our channel, put likes, and leave comments. Worse, after the explosion and extinguishing the fire hotspots on the roof of the power units and the areas around were strewn with debris with radiation levels of 10,000 roentgens per hour. The safe fraction for humans is actually 50 microroentgens. Compare 10,000 to 50 microroentgens. And that had to be cleaned up somehow. Anyway, we needed special equipment for all of this. We had to load this debris somewhere. You needed special dump trucks for that. Often the debris had to be thrown off the roof of the power units. And this was ordered to be done by conscript soldiers in symbolic, as we understand now, protection. It still makes me sick to my stomach to see the footage of their work. From the memories of eyewitnesses, I have heard the opinion that the behavior of firefighters, who extinguished the fire at the nuclear plant on the first night, and the liquidators resembles suicide. The liquidators often worked without protective overalls where robots were dying. The truth about the high doses they received was hidden from them, and they put up with it. And then they were happy to receive government certificates and medals, which they received before their death. And many of them never had time to receive them. When there was a need for special equipment to eliminate the consequences of the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, ordinary cars were sent to the scene. Special vehicles for such situations simply did not exist then, just as there were no lifeboats on the unsinkable Titanic. The liquidators started lining the cabins of their vehicles with lead, a heavy metal that effectively protects against radiation. For example, take a look at this KRAZ with symbolic protection, whose lead shows the marks of the hammers used to shape it. Drivers had to wear respirators to protect themselves from radioactive dust, the danger of which is that it stays in the body. Here is one helicopter driver's recollection. They were talking to scientists. One says, "I can lick your whole helicopter with my tongue, and nothing will happen to me." And the other, "Guys, do you fly without protection? You're shortening your life." We had to line the cockpits with lead sheets and cut vests out of thin lead. But it turned out that they only protected against certain kinds of radiation. Everyone's faces turned red, burned, and it was impossible to shave. Special equipment was needed to work in the accident zone and remove radioactive debris. This task was assigned to the KRAZ plant, located only 350 kilometers from Pripyat. The staff of the Kremenchuk automobile plant, inspired by the decisions of the CPSU Congress, actively worked on improving the quality, reliability, and durability of its vehicles. Engineers took the KRAZ 2561 dump truck, a modernized version of the 256 model, as the basis of the vehicle for Chernobyl. It turned out to be a heavy, hardy machine capable of shaking the driver out of his soul even when working in a sand pit, not to mention the radiation zone. This is how Uncle Vanya Zinkovich described it. "Oh, Opachki, I didn't hit it. Fifth second, motherfucker. Fifth second. Let's go." If you think that at KRAZ people just survive, you're wrong. At KRAZ, they're making money and fighting for a living. I only had enough for 10 minutes of driving. By the way, the 256 model was even exported to the West under the BelAZ brand to unite different Soviet trucks under one brand. The finalization was carried out in the experimental shop of the plant. In the early 80s, there were built prototypes of articulated KRAZ Chapter 3120, which the Army planned to use instead of more expensive tracked vehicles. In addition, the plant was already producing Model 255B, a six-wheel all-wheel drive all-terrain tractor known as Laptiaznik or Ogre. Meeting the 255 on the road always made an impression. Now there are not many of these cars left, and one of them, which has survived to this day, can be found by the numberogram, which I will give you. In general, the masters had a lot of experience, but the task was not standard. First of all, the driver's protection was taken care of. At first, they wanted to make an airtight lead capsule and cover it with an ordinary KRAZ cab so as not to attract much attention. But they quickly realized that it simply does not fit there. In fact, the single-seat capsule now became a cabin. Its walls were welded from double steel plates, and between them poured lead, which absorbed radiation. The thickest protective layer of lead, 3 centimeters, was on the floor and the thinnest on the roof. The greatest radiation background came from the ground, where the wreckage was lying. Remember that very KAMAZ that was lightly shaved and left a full glass window in front of the driver, which did not stop the radiation in any way. The special yellowish STKs that could somehow stop radiation on the KRAZ were only 30 by 30 centimeters in front of the driver. We even had to install 2 such windows at once in a lead frame, and in order to be able to wipe off the dirt from them without any problems, a regular classic glass with a single pneumatic wiper was installed on top of them. Here you can clearly see that there is a small window under one large glass with a wiper, through which the driver is already looking. Even worse, for the first copies of the truck, which received the index 256B1030, there were not enough special windows. They were only fitted at the front. You can see there's no side view, and on this picture, instead of 2 windows at the front, there is only one. What could be seen through such an embrasure is not clear at all, and the working conditions inside the truck promise to be extreme in every sense. First, you enter the cabin through a small door on the right side of the capsule and get comfortable in the cabin, which looks more like a cold metal safe. The heating system has been removed. Visibility, 2 yellowish windows in front, and right in front of them on the hood are 2 hemispherical mirrors. Until you look closely, you don't notice they're there. You could use them to look around. 2 more mirrors were installed on the front bumper to increase the angle of view to the rear. This is because even a standard civilian dump truck had poor visibility. 40 liters per 100. Is that normal too? And while KRAZ was making dump trucks with the highest degree of protection, the crash zone began to receive vehicles with hastily made hinged sets of anti-radiation protection, which were made at the auto repair enterprises of the USSR Ministry of Defense. Such a kit weighed as much as some light Soviet motorcycle. Well, in general, not much. Compare it with the level of protection of a KRAZ. After all, the mass of the lead capsule weighed more than 3 tons. That's like an entire 6-meter ZIL-114 government limousine. But there were also solutions intermediate in strength of defense. This photo shows, say, a Tajikistan 3205-based bus named Lead OBS. It is hermetically sealed, with windows covered with lead panels around the perimeter, with a powerful filtration unit on the roof. And what a banner next to it. Safe zone, safe working conditions. The contaminated radioactive dust was very dangerous. That's why the filtering system FA-100 was installed on the roof of the KRAZ capsule as well. These air purification systems can also be seen on military vehicles today. Install, for example, such a device on a truck tongue, and you can live and work in it without a protective suit even during a chemical attack. One part of the FA sucks in air with an electric fan and runs it through special anti-dust cassettes, while the other part is equipped with a filter catcher against poisonous and bacterial substances and even radiation. They even tried to hide the capsule under an ordinary cabin in order not to draw attention to the seriousness of the disaster with such special equipment. But the dimensions of the filtration unit did not allow it. And to ensure uninterrupted operation of the filtering system and the motor, batteries were installed on the KRAZ for insurance. There were also enough other problems. Look, the lead capsule is installed in place of the steering wheel and pedals. Not to change the design of the truck, which means more than 3 tons of weight pressure on the left side of the frame and front suspension. The pressure in the front tire was also increased and could have stripped the wheel. It was so critical and on the limit. The problem was solved by reinforcing the left spar, and the left leaf spring was reworked with a welder. The wheel disc was increased the pressure of the hydraulic booster to increase performance. The capsule itself was placed on a separate subframe and reinforced with struts. Because of the emergency situation, the work was literally around the clock. But running tests and measurements in the laboratory showed that the vehicle is indeed able to protect against radiation and even copes poorly with off-road terrain. Now the KRAZ Chernobyl was first assembled on the assembly line with other trucks, and then sent to the experimental shop, where it was finalized to version 030. After that, it was immediately sent by rail to Chernobyl, where in total about 10,000 units of different vehicles from all over the Union, from banal buses to rocket trucks MAZ-537, were pulled together. But the most terrible work was done by KRAZs. In total, 18 of them reached the site of the Chernobyl disaster, where they immediately began to remove contaminated debris and garbage around the reactor. But who drove them, and what did that person behind the wheel even feel? From the memories of the liquidator of the disaster. For the first time in my life, I had to find out what a headache was. Asked how the others felt. There were 2 to 3 weeks, and more said that everyone by the end of the first week upon arrival at the station starts to have constant headaches, weakness, throat perspiration. Noticed that when driving to the station and it was already visible, there was always a lack of lubrication in everyone's eyes. We squinted our eyes. It was as if they were drying out. Vladimir Mikhailin simply received a summons from his Kaluga military enlistment office as a private in the reserve with a specialty as a driver, where he was required to report with his belongings for compulsory service. He drove a fire truck, and now an ordinary resident of Kaluga had to drive a KRAZ. Every morning we would leave the camp and I would set up the car on the site with the help of excavators around the station. We removed radioactive soil and loaded it into dump trucks. The volumes were in the hundreds of tons. At the end of the work, we passed dosimetric control, took a shower, changed our clothes. But we had a superficial idea of how dangerous radiation was. By the way, an interesting feature, from inside the KRAZ capsule, it was impossible to turn off the engine, only from outside. During the shift, the engine was running. If the driver made a mistake, the engine would not start again. No one could help him. One can only guess about the driving sensations. But here is what Zinkovich again said about the usual KRAZ. The gearbox has 5 stages and speeds are scattered as if on different continents. The algorithm is simple. Here is a plate, 3rd, 2nd, 5th forward, 1st, 3rd, 4th back. And just when you think you've memorized the algorithm for changing gears, the KRAZ is like, I'm not going to change gears. The steering wheel is huge. It's not easy to drive in a straight line. The car doesn't like to yaw very much, it just crawls away. You have to adjust it all the time. Vladimir's trip to the accident zone lasted a month and a half. The period depended on the final radiation dose. For his work, he was awarded the Order of Courage and a generous monetary reward. At that time, they paid about 1,000 rubles a month, while 140 rubles a month was a normal salary for the Soviets. But while new people were arriving in the zone, the first liquidators often died in hospitals. The The very same firefighters lasted just a couple of weeks. From the recollections of eyewitnesses, now often instead of the usual consolations, the doctor tells his wife about her dying husband. You can't come close, you can't kiss him, you can't stroke him. This is no longer a loved one, but an object to be decontaminated. At such moments, both Shakespeare and the great Dante retreat. From the liquidator's memoirs, we began to think about the consequences probably after 3 or 4 years. When one of us fell ill, another died, someone went crazy, committed suicide. Then we began to realize the scale of the tragedy. I did not inform my parents that I had been sent to Chernobyl. My brother accidentally bought the newspaper Izvestia and saw my photo there. He brought it to my mother, saying, "Look, a hero." Mother cried. This is what the process looked like. The same simple cabs of the cars made the work of the liquidators easier, but most of the cars from Chernobyl had fanny tires because radioactive dust was packed into them. Every car leaving the accident zone was measured for radiation. However, with their radiation levels, they could only work until the following winter. Not all trucks survived to this time, and they were mothballed in the winter as they had no heaters. After completing the clearance task, the lead dump trucks were sent to a burial ground in the accident area. Their images have survived only in photographs. Although the story was over for the machinery, Chernobyl continued to live on. Interestingly, relatively recently, the story of the lead KRAZs continued at Lake KRAZ, which had served as a repository for radioactive waste since the 1950s. Kremenchuk dump trucks with cabs protected with lead were also used for conservation and backfilling of the lake.